I shouldn't be telling you this, but once you hear it, you can't unhear it. That's the first thing you need to understand. There are some stories that live only because people keep repeating them, passing them along like a virus, feeding them with attention. Most of the time, they're harmless, just spooky campfire tales dressed up as lost episodes or hidden files. But this one is different. This one isn't supposed to exist. If Nickelodeon knew I was saying this, I'd probably disappear. No, that's not exaggeration. That's not me trying to sound dramatic. I mean it literally. Because what I found isn't just some creepy cartoon rumor or another forgotten tape in a dusty warehouse. It bleeds into reality. And the deeper I dug, the more it bled into me. I know how this sounds. You've heard hundreds of deleted episode stories before. Grainy VHS tapes, weird background details, an animator who went rogue. You roll your eyes, you laugh. Maybe you feel a chill if the description is vivid enough. But then you close the video, or swipe away from the post, and life goes on. That's the normal rhythm of lost media horror. Fiction, tucked away neatly where it belongs. This wasn't like that. This one carried weight. It lingered. I couldn't scroll past it. Something in the way the post was written, something in the fragments of images that came with it, it felt wrong. Not just disturbing, but alive. And before I could convince myself to stop reading, it had already reached me. The way mold spreads across bread before you realize it's too late. I wish I could tell you I'm exaggerating, that this is just another internet story, designed to creep you out for a few minutes before you go back to your life. But I need you to hear me when I say this. You're already in it too. By listening, by knowing. You've already opened a door that can't be shut. That's why I'm warning you now, because I wish someone had warned me. You think this is just a story about a cartoon, but it's not. It's about the people who tried to erase it, the lengths they went to, and the thing that still won't stay buried. And if you're still listening, then I need to start at the beginning. It started on one of those nights where sleep felt impossible. You know the kind, where the hours stretch out like chewing gum, sticky and endless, and the glow of your phone becomes the only thing keeping you sane. I'd already scrolled through Instagram, checked Twitter twice, and even opened Facebook like some desperate archaeologist digging through ruins. Nothing helped. My brain refused to switch off. So naturally, I ended up on Reddit. Reddit at 3 a.m. is its own kind of limbo. You stumble into threads that feel half forgotten, digital ghosts of conversations years old. But the one place that never failed to pull me in was r/NoSleep. That subreddit was my guilty pleasure, my comfort blanket of unease. People poured their worst nightmares into it. Stories of shadows in the hallway, doors that opened on their own, things whispered into ears when no one was around. And the best part? Everyone pretended it was real. That was the rule. You didn't break the immersion. I'd been through dozens of those stories before. Some were chilling, others more like cheap horror movie scripts. I'd read so many that I thought I'd built up an immunity. That night, I even laughed to myself as I scrolled. Okay, I thought, hit me with your monsters, your haunted houses, your cursed objects. I leaned back, one hand holding the phone, the other cradling my coffee mug like a shield. It was all routine, normal, safe. But then I saw it, buried between posts about shadow people and creepy encounters. There was a title that stopped me mid-sip. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't written in all caps or begging for upvotes. It was short, plain, almost like it didn't want to be noticed. And maybe that's why I noticed it. The post's title was only 4 words long, 4 words that didn't scream for attention, but whispered in a way that made me lean closer to the screen. Something about it felt wrong. Not in a typical, this is creepy way, but in a subtle, stomach-sinking way, like realizing a reflection isn't moving the way you are. I told myself not to click it, not because I thought it was dangerous, but because it was late, and I knew I'd spiral down some rabbit hole if I wasn't careful. But curiosity is a vicious thing. It doesn't just knock at the door. It slips inside before you even notice. So I tapped. The screen flickered for just a second. Probably nothing. Probably just bad Wi-Fi. But it was enough to send a shiver across my skin. The post loaded, half broken, as if Reddit itself wasn't sure it wanted me to see it. And that was the exact moment everything stopped being routine. Looking back now, I realized that was my last taste of normalcy. The last breath of safety before I drowned in something much bigger, much darker, and much more real than a late-night scary story. I should have closed the app. I should have laughed it off and gone to bed. But instead, I scrolled down, and my life hasn't been the same since. The post began like any other NoSleep story, though the tone was different, quieter, more deliberate, as though the writer hadn't intended for strangers to read it. The username was strange too. Not a funny pun, not a string of random numbers, but a single word, hollow. No profile picture, no post history, just that one word, standing alone. The first line hooked me immediately. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't get rid of it in time. Not exactly the kind of cheery introduction you expect from a late-night horror binge. I remember staring at those words for a moment, feeling a chill that wasn't entirely from the air conditioning. It didn't feel like a story. It felt like a confession. The author described moving into a new apartment complex, a bland, nondescript place on the edge of a mid-sized city. The kind of spot you drive past without noticing. But they claimed that on their very first night, something felt off. They kept hearing faint scratching, not from the walls or ceiling, but from underneath the floor. At first, I thought it was pipes, the post read. But then I realized the sound wasn't mechanical. It was too deliberate, like someone dragging their nails against the wood, one at a time, waiting between each scrape as though listening for my reaction. I remember shifting in my seat, pulling my blanket tighter. That kind of description burrows under your skin because it's simple. No monsters, no elaborate lore, just a sound. The story went on. The scratching escalated into muffled whispers. Hollow wrote that they pressed their ear to the floorboards one night and swore they heard a voice, raspy and broken, repeating the same phrase. "Let me up." Here's where it got even stranger. Hollow claimed that when they complained to the landlord, the man didn't deny it. Instead, he looked exhausted, muttered something about "not again," and told them, "Don't answer it. Whatever you do, don't talk back." That was the first time I paused and checked the comments. Usually, NoSleep threads are full of people playing along, joking about how they'd move out immediately or how they'd salt the floors. But this thread, it had almost nothing. Just a few short responses, like "this isn't funny," and "mods will take this down." And then silence. I scrolled back to the story, unsettled. Hollow continued. Over the following nights, the whispers grew louder. Sometimes the floor would bulge, as though something beneath it was pressing upward, straining against the boards. They described lying awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the inevitable moment when the wood would crack. Then came the detail that truly froze me. A photo. It was grainy, black and white, maybe intentionally corrupted, but you could still make out the warped outline of the floorboards. One plank in the middle of the room was lifted slightly higher than the rest, bent upward just enough to suggest pressure from below, and etched into that board, deep enough to splinter the wood, were 3 words: "Let me up." I should have scrolled past. Instead, I leaned closer to the screen, heart thudding, as though I could spot some flaw that would reveal it as a hoax. But the longer I stared, the less fake it seemed. Hollow's post ended abruptly, mid-sentence. "Last night I woke up to find..." And then nothing. No conclusion. No edit. No follow-up. Just that unfinished sentence, dangling like a trap. I sat there for a long time, rereading it, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. It didn't feel like a performance. It felt raw, cut short, as if someone, or something, had interrupted. When I refreshed the page, the post was still there. But when I checked again 10 minutes later, it was gone. Deleted. The username Hollow had vanished too, as though it had never existed. I can't explain why that unsettled me more than the story itself. Maybe because it hinted at something outside of fiction, something actively trying to erase itself. But I wasn't done with it. I couldn't be. The words lingered in my head, carved into my thoughts the way they'd been carved into that wooden floor. "Let me up." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just reading another scary story. I was chasing something I shouldn't have touched, and I already knew I wasn't going to stop. Because if a story can vanish in real time, pulled down like it was never there, what else could vanish with it? What else was waiting beneath the surface, pressing upward, desperate to be let through? For a while, I told myself it was nothing. Just another creepypasta. Just another desperate attempt for attention on a subreddit filled with them. But that excuse crumbled fast, because the details wouldn't leave me alone. I remembered the photo most of all. That warped floorboard. Those carved words. I could still see it every time I closed my eyes. Something about it felt too precise. Like it wasn't staged. I've seen plenty of fake horror photos online, bad Photoshop jobs, props from Halloween stores, digital static filters, slapped on to look authentic. This one wasn't like that. The angle was wrong, like it was taken in panic. And the scratches weren't random. They had depth. Wait, so I did something I probably shouldn't have. I screenshotted it before the post vanished. At the time, I thought I was being clever. Now I know better. The first crack in my "it's just a story" defense came when I noticed the metadata. I'm not a tech expert, but I know enough to check the basics. When I pulled up the image on my computer, I saw the geotag info. Most pictures don't have that, especially if someone deliberately scrubs them before uploading. But this one did. Coordinates. I copied them into Google Maps, half expecting gibberish, but it led somewhere real. A street. An actual address. The pit in my stomach deepened when I zoomed in and saw the name of the apartment complex. It matched exactly with what Hollow had described in the story. That's when my brain started working overtime to rationalize. Maybe the guy had just used a real place as a setting. Writers do that all the time. It didn't mean anything. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that it meant everything. I showed the screenshot to a friend the next day. He laughed at first, but when I pointed out the coordinates, his smile faded. "That's near your side of town, isn't it?" he asked. It was. Less than a half-hour drive. I remember feeling both dread and a strange, gnawing pull, like the story wanted me closer. My friend must have sensed it, because he tried to shut it down quick. "Dude, don't get sucked into this. It's a prank or worse, some ARG crap. People eat this stuff up." He wasn't wrong. Alternate reality games thrive on blurring fact and fiction. But if this was a game, why delete the post? Why nuke the account? Why leave just enough breadcrumbs to follow? That night, I tried searching for the post again. Nothing. Not just deleted, scrubbed. Even cached versions were gone. The only proof I had was the screenshot. And that was when the real paranoia began. I started noticing odd things. A new Reddit thread would appear with a similar title, but vanish before I could click it. My phone buzzed once with a notification from NoSleep, only for it to disappear the second I unlocked the screen. For the first time in my life, I wondered if something on the internet was watching me back. The final push came a few days later. I was in the grocery store, just another boring evening, when I passed the bulletin board near the entrance. Flyers for babysitting, lost cats, cheap car repairs. And right in the middle, barely noticeable unless you were looking, was a photo. Grainy, black and white, a warped floorboard with words etched into it. "Let me up." I froze, groceries clutched tight against my chest, staring at it until people gave me strange looks. When I finally blinked, the photo was gone. Maybe someone had pulled it down. Maybe my brain was playing tricks. I don't know. But in that moment, I knew the truth I'd been avoiding. This wasn't just a story. It was bleeding out of the screen, crawling into the real world, one detail at a time. And I was already in too deep to walk away. I told myself I was only going to look. Just drive past the place, confirm it was real, and then let it go. That was the deal I made with myself as I pulled up the coordinates and typed them into my GPS. Of course, I already knew that wasn't true. Curiosity doesn't make deals, it makes demands. And once the seed is planted, it grows until there's no room left for anything else. The drive was short, too short. Every red light felt like a dare to turn back, but I kept going, chewing my lip raw, fingers drumming against the steering wheel. The city blurred by in pieces, strip malls, gas stations, neon signs promising cheap food and cheaper thrills. Then slowly, things thinned out. The streets grew quieter, darker. When I finally pulled up, the complex looked exactly as Hollow had described it. Bland, forgettable, beige brick walls with peeling paint, windows like tired eyes staring back at me. It should have felt ordinary, but it didn't. Even from the street, I could feel a heaviness in the air, like the building was exhaling something stale and sour. I parked across the road and just sat there, staring. My rational brain tried to supply excuses: bad construction, mold, a trick of the mind. But the longer I looked, the more convinced I became that the place didn't want me there. Still, I went in. The front door was unlocked, swinging open with the faintest groan. The lobby smelled of dust and old cigarettes. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing like angry insects. There were no plants, no decorations, nothing to soften the concrete gray walls. As I climbed the stairs, I thought I heard movement above me. A shuffle, then silence. I froze, listening, but nothing followed. My pulse hammered anyway. The apartment number from the post wasn't hard to find. Hollow had mentioned it casually in the story, almost like a throwaway detail. But here it was, door 3B. The number's crooked, one screw missing. I stood there for a long time, heart in my throat. I wasn't expecting anyone to answer, but I knocked anyway. Once, twice, nothing. I reached for the knob. To my surprise, it turned. The air inside hit me first. Damp, metallic, like blood and mildew. The blinds were drawn, casting the room in dim yellow light from a single lamp that leaned crookedly in the corner. The floorboards creaked beneath my shoes, as though resenting every step. And then I saw it, the warped plank. Right in the middle of the living room, one board jutted slightly upward, curved like something beneath it had been pressing against it for years. My breath caught. It looked exactly like the photo. I crouched down, fingertips brushing the edges. The wood was cold, unnaturally so, and the carved words were there, faint but unmistakable: "Let me up." I jerked back, my chest tight, throat dry. I wanted to leave, to run down the stairs and pretend I'd never seen it. But another part of me, stupid, stubborn, wanted proof, wanted something I could hold in my hands and say, "This is real." So I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. The shutter sounded far too loud in the silence. That's when the floor moved. At first, I thought it was my imagination, the adrenaline making me lightheaded. But then it happened again, subtle but undeniable. The warped plank shifted, rising a fraction of an inch, like something was pushing up from below. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my phone. The air grew colder, heavy with the weight of something unseen. And then came the sound. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. It was identical to the way Hollow had described it. Deliberate, testing, waiting. I bolted. I don't even remember running down the stairs or out the door. All I remember is the taste of metal in my mouth from breathing too hard, my hands shaking as I fumbled with my keys and dove into my car. But the worst part? When I look back at the photo I'd taken, the words were different. No longer "let me up." Now they read, "I see you." I don't remember driving home. Somehow I made it. I locked the doors, pulled the curtains tight, and sat in the dark, staring at my phone. The new photo burned into my brain like a brand. And yet, even after everything, even after every instinct screamed at me to forget it, I couldn't. I couldn't stop thinking about the scratching, the whispers, the warped floorboard, because I knew this wasn't the end. I'd opened a door, and whatever was beneath that floor was no longer content to stay hidden. The days after visiting that apartment blurred into one long stretch of unease. I didn't go back, not physically, but the place followed me anyway. I'd hear faint creaks in my own apartment at night, the kind of sound you can explain away once or twice as settling wood or a noisy neighbor. But when it comes at the same time, in the same rhythm, every single night, you stop telling yourself stories. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. I barely slept. My phone felt radioactive in my pocket, tainted by the photo it now carried. I thought about deleting it, but every time my finger hovered over the trash icon, something inside me screamed not to. Like the image didn't want to be erased. Like it belonged with me now. It wasn't long before the whispers started. Faint at first, like a radio tuned between stations. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, and hear them drifting up through the floorboards. Never clear enough to make out words, but soaked in intent. They wanted me listening. One night, I pressed my ear to the hardwood. I don't know what I expected. Maybe silence. Maybe proof I was losing my mind. What I heard instead chilled me to the bone. Closer. It rasped. I bolted upright, Hard hammering, but the room was still. No one there. Just me, my own ragged breathing, and the word echoing in my skull like a curse. I told a friend about it the next day. Not the same friend I'd shown the screenshot to, someone else, someone less likely to laugh it off. We sat in a coffee shop, the smell of espresso and burnt milk, doing nothing to calm me as I whispered what had happened. He frowned, stirred his drink, and said, "You realize you're describing textbook sleep paralysis hallucinations, right? Stress, lack of sleep, it all fits." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But hallucinations don't leave new scratches on your floor overnight. And when I showed him the photo, the one that had changed, he turned pale. "You edited this," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. That night, things escalated. I was lying in bed, the blanket pulled up to my chin, when I heard the creak of footsteps. Not from above me, not from the hallway, from directly beneath my bed. Every hair on my body stood on end. I held my breath, too terrified to move, and the sound came again, slower this time, deliberate, as though whatever was down there knew I was listening. I finally forced myself to lean over the edge, phone flashlight trembling in my hand. Empty floor. No shadows but my own. Still, the sound continued, muffled now, like it had receded deeper. That's when the voice returned. "Let me up." Clear this time. Clearer than Hollow had ever described. I scrambled out of bed, slammed the lights on, and pressed myself against the far wall, whispering no like a prayer. My chest heaved, lungs burning with panic. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but what would I even say? That my floor was begging me for freedom? I didn't sleep that night, or the one after. Every time exhaustion dragged me toward unconsciousness, I'd hear the scratching again, as though it could sense weakness. Then, 3 nights later, I caught it. Proof. I'd set up my phone to record overnight, balancing it on the nightstand with the camera pointed at the floor. The next morning, I scrubbed through hours of footage, bleary-eyed and ready to write it off as pointless. But at 3:17 a.m., the screen flickered. The warped board, the same warped board that had appeared in Hollow's photo, the same words etched across its surface, was there, in my bedroom floor. For a moment I thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I'd mixed up the files. But the timestamp proved it was real. It had happened while I slept, while I lay less than 3 feet away. And then the board twitched. Just once, a small jerk upward, but enough to send my coffee mug crashing to the floor as I watched the video. I couldn't stay there anymore. I packed a bag in minutes and drove to a motel across town, telling myself distance would help. But even in that sterile little room with buzzing neon outside the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that it had followed me. That night, as I lay in the unfamiliar bed, a knock echoed through the walls. Slow, patient, from the floor beneath me. And then a voice I recognized, raspy, broken, slid into my ears. "I see you." My blood ran cold. The words from the altered photo, spoken aloud now, no longer content to hide in pixels. I don't remember leaving the motel. I don't remember the drive home. What I do remember is sitting in my car at sunrise, hands locked on the wheel, and realizing I wasn't just dealing with a story anymore. This thing wasn't confined to Hollow's apartment. It wasn't even confined to that complex. It was with me. And the more attention I gave it, the more I listened, watched, remembered, the stronger it seemed to get. I think that's what Hollow meant, back in that unfinished sentence. Last night I woke up to find, maybe they'd realized, too late, that once you answer, once you acknowledge it, there's no way back. And now, I was the one finishing their story. I thought I'd hit my limit already, but I was wrong. The real breaking point came slowly, like rot setting in, until one day I realized I wasn't just afraid of the thing beneath the floor. I was afraid of myself. The paranoia followed me everywhere. At work, I'd be typing an email and suddenly freeze, convinced the faint click of the keyboard was echoing back at me in ways it shouldn't. I'd catch myself staring at the seams between floor tiles in the office break room, waiting for one of them to twitch. Even the sound of co-workers dragging chairs across the floor made my stomach knot. But the worst part was how it bled into my relationships. I tried to explain to people what was happening, and every time I did, I could see the gap widening between us. They'd nod, humor me, offer rational explanations. Stress, sleep deprivation, too much time online. The moment I mentioned Hollow, their eyes glazed over. It was like I'd stepped off the map into a territory no one else wanted to acknowledge existed, and I was alone there. One night, desperate for some kind of anchor, I called my friend again, the one who'd seen the photo change. I told him everything, my voice shaking, words tumbling out too fast to control. He didn't laugh this time. He didn't tell me it was fake. He just sighed and said quietly, "You sound like Hollow." That sentence broke me more than any whisper or scratch ever could, because he was right. I'd started like them, curious, skeptical, dipping my toes in, and now I was echoing their paranoia, following their breadcrumbs straight into the same trap. I wanted to scream at him, tell him he didn't understand, but what would be the point? My life had already narrowed to a single obsession, that warped board, those words carved deep enough to outlast reason. And that's when the dreams began. At first, I thought they were just nightmares born from exhaustion, but they grew sharper, more specific. I dream of standing in that apartment again, staring at the warped plank, and hearing the voice from below. Except in dreams, I answered back. I'd say, "What do you want?" And the thing would laugh, low and guttural, and whisper, "You already know." I started waking up with the taste of dirt in my mouth, as though I'd been chewing soil. My fingernails were chipped, caked with grime, though I couldn't explain how. Some mornings I'd find scratches on my arms, thin and deliberate, running in parallel lines. That's when I stopped pretending this was something I could manage. It wasn't about curiosity anymore. It wasn't about lost media or creepypasta or Reddit threads. This was a contagion, an infection that spread through attention, through memory, and I was rotting from the inside out. I tried fighting back. I threw out the phone with the cursed photo, smashed it into pieces, left it in a dumpster behind the grocery store. But that night, when I came home, the phone was sitting on my kitchen counter, intact, screen glowing with that same image. I laughed then, not because it was funny, but because I'd run out of sanity to spend. The kind of laugh that sounds more like a sob. That was my breaking point. Not the scratches, not the whispers, not even the voice. No, it was realizing there was no way to win. That everything I did, every attempt to cut it out of my life, only fed it more. And deep down, I began to suspect that was the point. It didn't want me dead. It wanted me hollow. Like the one before me. Like Hollow. You ever think you've outrun something, only to realize it was just pacing you the whole time? That's how it feels now. I thought the breaking point would be the end, that once I admitted defeat, maybe it would let me go. But I was wrong. It's still here. It lingers in the gaps of silence between sentences, in the way the floor creaks even when no one's moving. Sometimes I'll be sitting in my apartment, headphones on, music cranked to drown it out, and still I'll hear it. The faint scrape, the drag of something heavy against the underside of the floor. A sound that shouldn't exist when you live on the second story. And it's clever. It doesn't show up all at once anymore. It waits. It knows the perfect moment to remind me it's real. Like when I'm on a call for work and the faintest whisper bleeds through my headset. Or when I leave for groceries and come back to find one shoe by the door, turned upside down, as though someone tried to crawl into it. The worst was last week. I woke up in the middle of the night, gasping for air, convinced I'd been buried alive. My hands clawed at the sheets like they were dirt, and when I finally calmed down enough to turn on the lamp, I saw it. My fingernails were packed with soil again. Fresh, damp. The smell of earth filled the room, though my windows were shut tight. That's when I stopped sleeping in my bed. Doesn't matter. It follows me to the couch, to the floor, to every corner of the apartment. It doesn't need me asleep to play its games anymore. I know what you're thinking. Move out. Leave. Trust me, I tried. I packed everything into my car, drove halfway across the city, booked a motel room. I thought maybe distance would sever whatever connection had taken root. But at 3 in the morning, the lamp on the nightstand flickered, and the warped floor beneath the bed groaned, just once. It's not the apartment. It's me. Some nights I swear I hear Hollow's voice, faint and broken, repeating the same lines I once read in that cursed post. It's hungry. It doesn't stop. Don't feed it. Like a warning carved into the inside of my skull. But it's too late. I already fed it with my attention, my fear, my obsession. Now it doesn't need to lurk unseen. Sometimes I catch glimpses, a pale hand sliding back under the warped plank when I blink, a shadow stretching across the room when there's no light to cast it. I don't scream anymore. What's the point? The neighbors stopped checking a long time ago. And here's the part that scares me more than anything. I'm getting used to it. The first time I heard the whisper, it nearly drove me insane. Now it's almost familiar, like background noise. Like I've adjusted my life around it the way you get used to traffic outside your window. Sometimes I catch myself waiting for it, expecting the scrape, the breath, the laugh. And when it doesn't come, I feel a strange emptiness. That's when I realize the real horror. It isn't just haunting me. It's changing me. I've stopped calling friends, stopped answering texts. My world shrunk to this apartment, these floors, this presence. And deep down, I know that's exactly what it wants. Not just to be acknowledged, but to become the only thing that matters. And if you think you're safe, listening to this from the comfort of your own room, let me warn you, you've already given it what it needs. Your attention, because now you've heard it too. And once you let it in, it never leaves. It's still here. And now so is it. If you've made it this far, I need you to stop. Not because I'm finished, because you should be. I know how this works. Curiosity keeps you scrolling, eyes locked to the screen, waiting for the next revelation. That itch in your brain won't let you quit halfway. Because what if the worst is yet to come? What if the secret is just a little further down? That's how it gets you. That's how it got me. I should have looked away. I should have closed the post, thrown my phone across the room, forced myself to forget. But I didn't. And now everything in my life bends toward it, like nails dragged to a magnet. Every choice I make, every breath I take, feels predetermined, like I'm just another sentence in its story. And you're no different. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself you'll only read one more line, one more comment, one more paragraph? And yet here you are, still here, still feeding it with your attention. You could close this right now. You could walk away, pretend none of this ever happened. But you won't, will you? You'll keep scrolling, because deep down you want to know how it ends. That's the trap. Every word is a hook, pulling you deeper. Every whisper of doubt you ignore tightens the net. And the more you need to know, the more it already owns you. You might think, so what? It's just a story. Stories can't hurt me. That's what I thought too. But stories are older than truth, older than history. They spread because they stick to us, infest us, take root in the places we don't guard. They grow stronger every time someone repeats them, every time someone listens, every time someone can't resist scrolling down. And if you're still here, then it's already inside you. Maybe you'll hear it tonight. A faint scrape under the floorboards, a whisper too close to your ear when you're alone in the dark. Maybe nothing will happen at all, at first. That's the real cruelty. It waits until you've convinced yourself you're safe, until you've forgotten this little warning, and then it moves. So here's your final choice. You can keep going. You can test the limits of your curiosity. Keep scrolling until the last word, the last sentence, the last warning. But don't say you weren't told. Don't say you didn't feel the dread rising in your chest right now, urging you to stop. Because once you reach the end, there's no going back. The story won't be mine anymore. It'll be yours. So don't scroll down. Seriously, don't.